here to give his address. I just want to make it clear that this address is not necessarily a press briefing as such, but we really addressing the whole world. Besides the president, there's Mr. Mnangagwa. To the left of the president is the treasurer. We also have Mr. Khaled Shumba there, is the director of information in the executive, and Mr. Shaw. We also have Mr. Mfambi just at the back there. So without wasting any time, I'll give it to the president to address us. When he finishes, we'll take a few questions. So over to you, President.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think I should start by really apologizing for the delay that has been beyond our control. I mean, the one who was introducing persons is Madhuku to us. He's our national spokesperson at the same time as the administrator of our party. I want to say that first and foremost, I'm speaking on behalf of the whole party of the NCA. We are starting by joining the rest of the country in extending our condolences to the families that have lost their beloved ones owing to the current pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. We are very sorry about that. We also wish those who are not well a speedy recovery as the NCA. And I should thank you very much for coming. We intend to be doing this from now on more often. We think that every month as a party, we should be addressing the world, addressing the country on these issues. And then in the process, let me make it clear that as we do that, we are trying to tell the world who we are as a political party. We first introduced ourselves to the Zimbabweans when we participated in the 2018 general elections. We did our best to field the candidates from councillors in a few areas, members of parliament in a few constituencies, and the presidential election. We will be, in the course of the year, be showing the world that we are a serious party, we are a growing party, and before the end of the year, we will have held our elective congress, so that we keep the world knowing. It will also be live streamed as we do the delegations and so on at the national level and the provincial level. We would want Zimbabweans to see who the NCA is. So beyond me, beyond Madhuku, beyond Mnangagwa, beyond Courage, beyond the other members who are not here, so that we really offer an alternative to the people of Zimbabwe. That, I think, will be the first point for you to know. The NCA is here to stay. It is a growing political party that intends to keep projecting its views on the development of the country from time to time. We will be addressing today briefly on 3 issues, and then we'll be keeping coming back to you. The first issue would be the COVID-19 situation and how it is being handled in our state as a country. The second situation, we'll be looking at the education sector. And then thirdly, we'll be looking at what is now being called national dialogue or political dialogue. Those are the 3 issues I will address today. And then I think as we keep meeting, we'll be picking up if there are any questions. In terms of the COVID-19 situation, as a party, we have 2 broad observations. The first observation being that certain things the government has done well and must be commended. And then secondly, there are areas where the government has not done well, and we would want to put that across. In areas where they have done well, as a party, we believe that the lockdowns have been a useful strategy. Never mind the problems that have come in terms of the safety nets that had to come in. But the national lockdowns have worked well. They've helped a lot in arresting the situation. And there, as NCA, we applaud that. We support the strategy of a lockdown. We actually believe, of course, that up to now it has worked. I think we don't believe that they will extend it next week. we would have to adopt as a strategy. So that we must make clear. But there are areas where the government has not done well, and we want to make this clear and hope that the government will attend to those issues. The government has been very secretive in the way it has been handling important aspects of the COVID-19 pandemic. One, the information dissemination process has been quite secretive, sometimes not trustworthy. We know, for example, that some people had to go to the High Court. Of course, they didn't succeed there. But just to get an order that makes clear what exactly is happening, what are the numbers, are these the correct numbers, and so forth. So we are not, as NCA, convinced that the government information framework relating to the COVID-19 situation is adequate, and would want to call upon the government to be more open, more trustworthy in that regard. Then again, in that area, the government is still completely secretive in the area relating to vaccines, what is going to be happening with the vaccination program. We are getting these things in bits and pieces, so that only yesterday we then began to realize that the government had indeed actually bought some vaccines from China, that there was this donation from China. It was coming like, by the way. We would want to call upon the government to lay out a comprehensive program that is clear as to what is it that is going to happen. We would want to condemn the approach of any cut and paste approach, look at what is happening in other countries. We all know, and that is not debated, that we have frontline workers, which is the language used across the world. So our health workers, doctors, nurses, and all the health professionals would be our frontline people to get vaccination first, and so forth. Then, in our view as the NCA, we believe, by the next point I will come, that the next line of people would be teachers in the education sector. We are very much concerned about the state of our education sector. And we believe that they would be the next line. Let these things be thrown out. We will call upon other people to also debate who else gets it. So if we get 200,000, we would know that that goes to the frontline persons. But if there is 800,000, who is next? We would call upon the state to look at this. So we are making clear there is NCA, those are the aspects we are not happy with. Then of course, more fundamentally, we are not happy with what appears also to be a lot of corruption around the COVID-19 situation. They were the first steps that the government took when, I think, some allegations involving the former minister. But that was not the end of the matter, and that should not have created the impression that we've dealt with that. So we would want to condemn the elements relating to the corruption around this issue. Even as late as yesterday, we're hearing someone writing how the police were getting involved in this. You would want a lockdown to be extended because you then get to make money out of the kind of people that you allow. Those things we condemn. So that is our first point on the COVID-19 situation. Otherwise, we would want to say in closing that it is not just a government issue. We would call upon all Zimbabweans to realize that there is need for personal responsibility. The masking up, physical distancing, social distancing, ensuring that you sanitize, things like this. And then when you have a death that has happened in the family, we would call upon people to understand that we conduct our funerals these days differently. We still have families in the country that would want to resist that and say, no, we can't, no, you should not be negotiating and getting the police officers to be coming around. That's my first point, our first point on the COVID-19 situation. Then we go to our second point, which relates to education. We are very much disappointed by the grade 7 results. I think this we have said that sometimes we've seen as individuals on Twitter. We believe that the less than 38, so 37 point something % pass rate in grade 7 is actually something that was called upon all of us to realize that something is not right in our education system. And because of that, we believe as NCA that that result is what can be called a tip of the iceberg, if we use that expression, showing that things are not right there. And we would rightly describe it as a national disaster, and everyone must regard it as such. Now, as the NCA, we are a social democratic party. We believe that a proper education system is one of the important aspects of raising people out of poverty, raising communities out of poverty. And that's one of our belief systems. So if you want to undermine the poor and the marginalized, give them an improperly structured education. If you look at those results, they will tell you that many of our underprivileged communities are the ones that suffered most. So where would you go? But others will be privileged. If you look at what you see on Facebook and so forth, you get, 1. Even our spokesperson here got a son getting 1. But these are just a small section of the community. And then that is very much worrying. So where do we place the blame? We would want to place the blame squarely, largely on the ZANU-PF government in respect of these results of the Grade 7 results. Why are we placing the blame on the ZANU-PF government? We are doing that because there has been what I can call a systematic neglect of the education sector. In the first 10 years of independence, the ZANU-PF government under President Mugabe did very well. We are products of that system of education that was sound. But suddenly from the 1990s onwards, they started neglecting it with a lot of concentration in other areas, but more so going into government, not so much to look at these very serious issues about what's happening in our education sector. That was not the primary thing. And that's when you get so much high levels of corruption. So we believe, and this is the charge that we want to make, that ZANU-PF has been engaged in a systematic neglect of our education sector. And that systematic neglect, which has been building over the years, is reflected in the last year's Grade 7 results. It's not so much about COVID, or so much about, it is more to do with a clear decaying framework that suddenly blows out. And think if some people are not careful, they'll think they will look for short-term explanations. We believe that must not be. It must be a long-term explanation. Where has that come from? There's been a systematic reduction in the salaries that are paid to people in the education sector. We all know this. There's also been a senseless way of dealing with the real concerns of the teachers. I mean, you know how the last year's strikes were handled. And those are the things. It's a typical way of doing it. You also look at the school infrastructure. Some of the pictures coming on social media, you would not believe that in this country we have schools like that. Now, if you create an environment like that for learning, you cannot expect to produce anything and so forth. Then, currently as we speak, there is actually the absence of a strategy of our education in the face of COVID-19. There is absolutely nothing. And the government is not working on that strategy. You can have people talking about online education, which is the language that is used by everyone. Again, we build an elite society. As NCA, we believe that there's still an important framework to look at, even in the face of COVID-19. Face-to-face education in many of our marginalized communities is still mandatory and unavoidable. You cannot do without that. So we must sit as a country and say, what exactly do we do? And we call upon all stakeholders to approach this. What is worrying us as a party is that in other societies, even in the heat of this, there are visible steps that are taking place in trying to get kids back to school in safe environments. We have not that yet. And I think all of you in the media, you know what's happening in South Africa, and I was following what was happening there. There were parents, of course, were complaining that it is not safe, but there's already some strategy which you keep getting. This is absent, and there we would want to call upon the government to put in place a framework where they involve all interested stakeholders in coming up with an education strategy in the face of COVID-19, with a view to realizing that our marginalized communities still require face-to-face education. And you cannot make it a golden thing. So now we do online when you know that the majority of our people will not be able to do that. Then finally, our third thing we are addressing as NCA is political dialogue. And this is the last aspect. We believe that there is need for political dialogue in the country in view of the deteriorating and continuing deterioration of our economic situation. The lives of Zimbabweans are still quite difficult to survive, you know that. And I'm not going to bore you down with the kind of situation we are in at the moment. One of the worst scenarios that we saw yesterday or the day before yesterday was a statement, I don't know if that's a correct statement, coming from government where they were declaring the state of the roads a national disaster or something like that. It's a very meaningless thing. They should just attend to the roads, but just get the rains. And then they expose that we have no roads in more than 70% of our country. No roads, no nothing. Bridges are falling apart. You also saw that disastrous thing in Chimanimani, where there was an accident. I think you saw that. Someone is killed because the road framework was not done properly, etc. These are some of the problems that we're facing. But to get out of them, we have, yes, political dialogue, but there's one area where we disagree as the NCA, and we wish to make this clear, and it's one of the reasons why we think the world must know. We don't believe that we can actually have the partition of Zimbabwe. There used to be a partition of Africa, and some people want to think that there can be a partition of Zimbabwe, where Zimbabwe belongs to two political formations. You are either with this formation or with that formation. We totally reject that. Zimbabwe is for all Zimbabweans. And as a party, we exist because we believe that the two current political parties that are the dominant ones are not, they are a disaster in themselves. The reason why Zimbabwe is where it is at the moment is this political belief that you are either ZANU-PF or you're either this other party. Now I've seen that recently there was an acceptance that now the MDC is split. If you read today's papers, you will see that one of the commentators, I think is Professor Chan from London, he is regarded as an expert, which is completely nonsensical. He cannot be an expert on political issues in this country. But he made a statement which was completely worrying. He says, look, there must be dialogue, and then we add another element. There used to be ZANU and MDC, now the MDC has split. So you now have three. That's what he said. And that's a statement which I know my friends in the other party, Monzo and others, are very happy that, okay, we've been recognized by Chan in London. And then Zimbabwe sit at home and say, okay, we now have three groups of people. Then I also read that the churches, they are complaining. And why? What is their frustration? Their frustration is they go to Mnangagwa, go to Chamisa, go to Mnangagwa, go to Chamisa. That's what they're doing. I mean, a seesaw like that. And then when they don't get joy there, they complain, there's no. They forget that this country belongs to more than two political parties. So we would not accept any process of dialogue that simply involves coming together of two political parties or negotiations. They call them negotiations, which I'm sure they are referring to some power sharing arrangement. We believe that there must be stakeholders, which takes me to this point that I want to make as NCA. We in the NCA, we are in a political actors dialogue in Poland. That's where we are. We believe that if you are a political actor means a political party. If you are a political actor, there can be only one platform for that process. Go to Poland. That's where there are other political parties. We understand that there are political parties who say, no, we are not going to Poland because there are people who lost the 2018 elections. Everyone who is not Mnangagwa lost the 2018 elections. So it's completely unacceptable. If you want platforms where the winners are, they are in parliament, go and discuss in parliament. But if you want to talk about the future of Zimbabwe, where we are as Zimbabweans, then we can assure you that we reject this nonsense of saying that the future of our country must be partitioned between two political parties or three political parties. That's the point we want to make clear. So our call is where political parties come in and discuss, Poland is the platform for that. Where you want other stakeholders to be involved, then I think we can create that platform where political actors in dialogue and other stakeholders can come together. In that case, we would welcome the churches' initiatives and other initiatives that seek to bring into being civil society, churches, trade unions, all sorts of groups. Those would be. What we are opposed to is a political actors negotiation that chooses two or three political actors. We are political actors as NCA. And our colleagues in Poland are political actors. And Poland must remain the platform where these things are. Why we are saying it because as we stand at the moment, Poland has actually, we as NCA put across things in Poland. One of the things that we have achieved there, we have slowed or stopped the Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment number 2 bill. We understand it's in Parliament now, second reading. But the reason why that bill has been slow is not because of COVID. It's because of the points that we made. We rejected it as Poland. The NCA was in the driving seat of saying we can. We called upon the government to take out amendment number 2 and take it out and let's discuss what amendments ought to be made. Then secondly, we have also tabled there amendments, political and electoral reforms we would want to see ahead of the next elections. And these are not yet debated. But I know that these are the kind of things that any other political party would bring in. We have called upon society to look at the constitution and amend it to ensure that the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission is not just appointed by the president with some minimal involvement of the parliamentary process. We've said that, and we would not want 2023 to be run by an electoral commission that is appointed by the president. I said it at some point, I think when I spoke with Pres Mnangagwa in the Newsday at some point, they wrote a story where they were saying, we are still on that same score, that we would want to see an electoral commission which is appointed with the involvement of all political actors and with the buy-in of others. Then the second thing we have also tabled in Poland, and we think that whoever is wanting dialogue would want that, is to expand proportional representation. And here we should not make it a secret. We should make it clear that it is in our interest as NCA to have an expanded proportional representation thing. The big political parties don't want this because they want to parcel the country between themselves in a winner-take-all thing. We have put that. We have also talked about access to the public media. We still know that even though we now have access to social media and so forth, we are not accessible. People are not accessing us in the rural areas, but they are accessing ZBC, they are accessing things like that. We would want clear rules on how we access the public media. These things have been placed before the discussions that ought to take place. So if this happens and if we get a political discussion, we would be able to help as a nation some of the perennial situations we have seen. I know that in the political environment now, there are complaints of human rights abuses. We accept that. And I want to make clear that as NCA, we believe that human rights observance, and when we check whether a country is going by human rights observance, we don't look at the majority of the people. We look at the most active minority. You are judged in relation to that most active minority. So if you have 4, 5, 6 people that are very active, it's a matter of how you treat those people. That is how we judge your human rights observance. That's what human rights are all about. Human rights are about respect for everyone, including those who are regarded as in the minority. So I think the government is mistaken there. And this is coming from President Mugabe's legacy, which says if the majority are not complaining, if the majority do not believe in this, then you are 3 or 4 people. And you know that video where he talks about Madhuku being whatever he says in that video. And so forth. It was a real notion which Mnangagwa has carried on, which says that if the majority, if everyone else is quiet, and you are not quiet, then we will beat you up, we will arrest you. That is what ought to be used to judge whether or not a country is respecting human rights. What does it do to the few that keeps coming up? It is on that score that we believe this issue can also be an issue that must be discussed within the framework of a political actors platform. And then we also have, lastly, we've seen the local authorities, the disaster that is there. And that no sense, but then that disaster in the local authorities ought to be placed alongside the disaster in central government, the relationship between central government and local authorities. These things must be discussed. So I think I must make my point clear on this. I want to just close there and say that regarding political dialogue, our position as NCA is that if you are a political actor, if you are a political party, go to Poland. And Poland is the only platform for political actors. If you want to go and negotiate for power and so forth, there's no place for that in this country. This country is not partitioned between two political parties. Let's work on electoral political reforms and we'll go to the next election. But if you are not a political actor like a political party, we support an all stakeholders platform where we can have continuous discussion. But that all stakeholders relates to those who are not political parties, churches, and we can list all the civic society and so on, those. But for political parties, come to Poland. That's where we can talk. I think that's our statement for now. We will discuss other issues.
Yes. Okay, thank you, President. We can now take questions. Those of you who want to ask questions, we said that it was not a press briefing, but of course, we cannot avoid questions because you guys are now here and you have listened to what the President said. We will take any questions. Yes.
Okay, my name is Lozenlo. Professor, your critics argue that there have not been any changes in terms of the issues that you have been discussing at the level of Poland. Would you say there have been any successes so far for the past year or so that you've been meeting the political parties? Have there been any successes in your dialogue at Poland level?
Okay. Yeah, maybe if there is any other questions, we can just take the question.
Perhaps I can answer that.
Answer that one while
I'm still thinking if they still want to pass that. It's a very good question that you posed. I think I should use it as an opportunity to say that what is Poland? Poland is a platform where we come in as political actors with the political parties. We put across our ideas, we exchange with the government in that platform. There has been a lot that has been discussed. Some of the things the government has not taken up because Poland is not a government. And so we accept, and the frustration of many people to say that they would want what they call tangible result. But if tangible result means coming up with either new government, that is not what Poland is. I will list the things that we have achieved, and I've given you one already. We stopped the Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment number 2. Even though it is in Parliament, it is not going anywhere. We said that was, and that's it. Secondly, we have placed before Poland, we are actually coming up with a draft electoral and political parties bill. It's actually called an electoral and political parties bill that will come out of Poland. In that bill, we are putting in a new electoral act that will cover all the concerns that people have been raising about how elections are conducted. And we believe that at the end of the process, it will then be a really tangible thing that you can take home. Then at the beginning, you might have known only because of COVID did the army come back to be in the streets. It was in a Poland platform that we told the president to remove. Remember when we started, the government was operating like it was still coming out of the coup, and you were seeing soldiers everywhere. And it was a Poland discussion that they should get out of that. Then we have had an economic summit that has made a lot of contributions to some of the things that are coming out of the Ministry of Finance and the Reserve Bank governor. We had actually a lot of engagement to do some of the policies that are coming out. It's a slow process, but if you give it another year, you will see much more than what is coming out. I think that's what I can say.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Prof. I don't know if there's a question, but I want to concur with you strongly in terms of education, that no matter where we are in terms of COVID-19 infections and deaths, we don't expect the president to extend the lockdown, particularly insofar as institutions of learning is concerned. From creche, primary, secondary, teachers' colleges, polytechnics, universities, they have to open. There have to be some mechanisms in which whether it's taking batches, surface and so on, but institutions of learning have to open if you have to make any progress, meaningful progress in this country. This is coming from what you have cited about the recent results. Indeed, it's just a tip of iceberg. You correctly said it. We may not measure the disaster we have in higher education. You may call it online teaching and learning, then it is universities are writing exams and so on, Okay, we may not tell the world the percentages, the people just pass and go through and so go to the next semester and so on. But in terms of quality, what quality any product are we going to have if we continue shutting down schools? I think something we need to reflect about that. Education is just to open and you have to go on. The new normal is to go on with the guidelines to save, to protect everybody, teachers and students. We just have to open schools. So we don't expect that lockdown is to be extended and schools have to open.
Yes, I think what I can say in addition, the point you are concurring with, we are saying as NCA, there is not an effective strategy of education in the face of COVID-19. If you say to the government, give us a document where you indicate what your strategies are in the face of COVID-19 and how you go about it, that is what is absent. That's what we are calling upon. And I think the ideas you are putting across would be relevant in that regard.
And through you, Chair, as a point of order, as a press conference, people should identify themselves. Because it might end up like journalists agree with NCAE, Professor Madhuku's position on lockdown. So, as journalists, we disassociate ourselves from his comment.
Okay, fine, it's okay. We take the point from Commander Fumane. Okay, point taken. Is there any other question? If you don't have any other question, like when we finish this briefing, we are not in a hurry to leave this place. So some of you there, we understand some who want even probably shown clips of the interview, and we're still here for a moment to attend to any other burning questions. So we'd like to thank you for coming to this briefing, and as the President indicated when we started, we will make it a habit as the NCA party to frequent this place, so that here and there we also make it clear to you and the whole world in terms of our positions, the position that we will be having as NCA. So thank you for coming. I think this is the end of our briefing.
All right.
Thank you.